As some of you may have noticed this summer, my attendance here has been pretty much non-existent. I've had an incredible summer, and it was a lot of different things, but one of those things was a trip to Italy. Now, how many of you travel? I know pretty much everyone in this room does, whether it's just to see family or grandbabies, or because we're required to for work frequently. But I do all of the above, but one of these things that has been in planning for 2 years and then actually postponed for a year so that one of the people could make it was a trip to Italy. And it's the first time that I've done a trip with girlfriends internationally. And the trip was really incredible on a multitude of different levels because it included friendship. And it was really kind of funny because I did a lot of reading to try to understand Italy before I went and kind of be a little bit familiar. And then, of course, the food, because I'm a huge foodie, and then the fun part. But the best part of this trip was when we were planning it and people would ask me questions about going to Italy, and I would be on the receiving end of these looks of sort of, are you out of your flippin' mind? Because their question would be, so who are you going with? And I would tell them. And then I would have to extemporize in terms of, well, you've gone with them somewhere overnight before, right? No, we're just good friends. We hang out a lot. And you can just see them thinking, you're going to Italy with people you've never gone anywhere with before overnight? And I found myself saying, no, really, I know these people. This is going to be okay. We mesh really well. And in my heart, I believed this. I mean, I truly did. Well, the great part is that it was even better than I thought. I would never in a million years have expected it to go poorly because these women are incredible. But it absolutely was fantastic. And I do spend a lot of time with these women. They actually are on the same lake that we are for the summer, so we do spend a lot of time together. But we had an incredible time, and I will tell you that we were completely inept at selfies. And we decided that we had to learn how to do this so that we could post for all of our friends. And our children kept telling us how inept we were at selfies. But we had an incredible time. But the part that was so interesting is so you think you know me. And that was what all these people were trying to tell me, is that you've never traveled with them. You really don't know them well. And that was true. But what I knew about them and how generous they were as people just was multiplied when we were on this trip. And it was a real adventure for us. And I think we just went with the right intent that it was incredible. So then talking about the framework and thinking about Italy, and I'm sure many of you have been there, but you have this sort of backdrop of a framework that's really kind of incredible because you have the Roman Empire influence, you have the Roman Catholic Church that once ruled and still has an immense influence on the country, not to mention all of the politics and the history and the ancestry that goes with both of those. But then you also have the Spanish influence of when they ruled at a time. And that's still evident in even some of the artwork in some of the smaller communities. But then you have this genius of all the artists. I mean, you have Michelangelo and you have Da Vinci, just to name a couple. And what I found so incredible from the artwork perspective was that to the world, David is the perfect man, sculpted in a time when we didn't even understand the human anatomy. To people in Italy, David has a fierce, absolutely committed face to being the underdog fighting against oppression for freedom, which is not something I had ever thought about because I didn't grow up in Italy and never had really thought about it that way. And one other piece that I found incredibly impressive, of course I'm female, was that at the Duomo in Florence, they have different plaques that depict occupations from long ago. The first one's sort of astronomy, and then we move into what today we would call lawyers or justices, and it's basically the holders of the law. And the third one depicts what they believe is the first time a female was seen in artwork in an occupation that would contribute to society as a weaver. Which is a really small plaque in the size and scope of the Domo, but pretty freaking incredible for me. And then you have what you want to try to do is come at least some modicum of familiarity with what drives the people today. So you have the backdrop of the history of that they still live in homes that have escape routes for when they're under siege from enemies. And then you have this incredible land that is just beautiful beyond measure, but has challenges because it really can't support its people to feed it because the land quality isn't there nor the mass. But yet you have these young people that we ran into time and time again that were so warm, so passionate about what they did, and able to tell you their history of their country inside and out, which was phenomenal, were very well read from a global perspective and had this immense faith in their future. And it was just an incredible experience of a country. And this happened on trains, and it happened in restaurants, and it happened as we were touring. It was fantastic. Of course, then we get to the food. And for me, this was one of the highlights because the artisanal cheeses and meats and everything, and then the fact that it's basically displayed, and even in a city the size of Florence, Italy, it's basically a market with individual vendors, which is pretty incredible. And because we are foodies, we did a whole day of taking a cooking class. And it was one of the great experiences because actually only 2 of us actually cook of the 4. So it was fantastic for for all of us to get involved and have professional chefs kind of show us how to make homemade pasta, sauces, and of course tiramisu. And the ravioli on the far left, or to your right, is what we made. That was one of our dishes. But again, this small sort of market for vegetables, and then the best macchiato I've ever had in my life. And whether that was because I was completely exhausted and needed caffeine, or because it was really that good, I'm not sure. But it was fantastic. But all told, what I found most incredible is as we travel, sometimes out of requirement for work, frequently out of obligation for family, and hopefully because we enjoy it as well, and sometimes to rejuvenate. For me, this trip was incredible because it took friendship to sisterhood. And on a daily basis, I always think that happiness is something we should aspire to. And sometimes that's because your husband calls you just to see how your day is going and to check in what time you'll be home. Or you get a text message from your son in college that says, hey, just checking in. Sometimes it's because there's coffee creamer still in the fridge, but it's happiness. But this trip took happiness to a different level. For me, joyous is not a word I use very frequently because to me it's the epitome of happiness. Because it's not just happiness in an experience, but it's happiness actually to your soul. It takes it to almost an epiphany level. And that's what this trip did. It took it to a level of joyous because of all the mixes of experiences and appreciation for other cultures. And most importantly, to spend 10 days with incredibly selfless and generous women that became sisters. Thank you, Meg.